What's the difference between a preamp and a phono preamp? Okay, this is a good one because I know a lot of people get confused about this. So, and we've probably touched on this before, but hey, here we are again. This is from Albara in Saudi Arabia. And Albara writes, I love vinyl, and I understand that the signal which comes out of a cartridge is very weak, very small, and requires a phono preamp to convert it to line inputs. But what I don't get is the difference between this and a normal preamp. I am really confused, and I'm afraid that if I used a separate phono preamp and connected it to a separate normal preamp, the signal will be processed twice before it gets to a power amp, which might affect sound quality. Well, yeah, we'll go through that. And there is quite a difference between a phono preamplifier and a preamplifier. The biggest differences between the two are something called the RIAA curve, which is an extreme equalization network that a phono preamplifier has that a regular preamplifier does not. And there are big gain differences as well. So let me give you a little bit of background. So years ago, before PS Audio came around and kind of got people used to the idea of a separate phono preamplifier. I mean, we weren't the first, but we were certainly among the first. And this was in 1974. And back when we started, every preamp manufacturer at the time, Dynaco, Audio Research, Levinson wasn't around. I don't remember. Anyway, Macintosh, all of them, they all had phono preamps built into their preamplifier. So when you got a preamplifier, you hooked your cartridge right up to the preamplifier's phono input and played it to your heart's content. What may not have been apparent to you or to people back then is that inside of this, we still had two separate boxes. We still had two separate circuits. We had a phono stage and we had a preamplifier stage. And together, they work in the same way that a separate phono preamp and a separate phono stage work. So in 1974, when Stan and I first started, our first product was a separate phono preamplifier. And we did that because we could make and put all our energies into making a better sounding phono stage that you could then hook up to any kind of preamplifier and get better sound than the built-in phono preamplifier that you might have had in your Dynaco or whatever you had. So that's how that all started, but they've always been separate, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for it. But let's go through the main reason, which is the RIAA curve. So the RIAA is the Recording Institute of America Association or I don't know. But they now concern themselves with digital rights management mostly, not so involved in it. But the long playing record, the LP, came about, and others, but it came about because of a whole bunch of things. The micro groove needle, very, very tiny needle, the RIAA curve, which is probably the biggest thing. And what that did is it reduced the level of bass and cranked up the level of high frequencies. And it did that for a couple of reasons. One, bass notes, loud bass notes, take up a lot of room on the groove. They have they're slow, low frequencies, so they take up a lot of room on the LP when you're cutting the LP. And high frequencies, little tiny wiggles that move very quickly, don't take up as much. Secondly, there's a lot of surface noise on a record. So if you could play a record, a vinyl record, and then reduce all the high frequencies, then all that, which is where all that scratchy noise and the sound of the needle scratching through the record, that would all be reduced, right? Well, so too with the signal. So what they did is they said, okay, in order to get more room on the disc, we're going to reduce the bass by 20 dB, and we're going to jack up the highs by 20 dB. So now we have this thing that kind of looks like this, and 2120. This is the middle frequency where it bends. And And so if you were to listen to a record without a phono preamplifier, let's just say you put it into a straight preamplifier, it would sound awful. It would have no bass, and it would just have all these highs. So the RIAA curve then is an equalizer that goes like this. So it reduces the highs, it jacks up the bass. And now we have a flat frequency response. So that's the biggest difference. That's not inside of a regular preamplifier. Also gains. We have gains that are humongous, and you mentioned that, of course. If you have a moving coil cartridge, you're putting out microvolts, and they're very small signals that come out of there, and we might have gains of up to 10,000. You know, you can get up towards of 80, 90 dB. That's huge. Then it goes into a preamp. So that's the difference between the two. And putting it directly in, well, we used to provide a pot, just a volume control. We had, our phono stage had a lot of gain, and a lot of people used it with no preamplifier afterwards, shot it straight into the power amp, and that worked great. It's what we did for years. But today's preamps are really, really good, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Hope that helps. Thanks for the question. I'll talk to you tomorrow.